Hello, and welcome to Talking Perspectives. I am your host, Nick Andreas, and let's start, as always, by taking a look at what you may have missed in print and interviews this week at sonicperspectives.com. Starting it off, Mr. Big released a live video of Colorado Bulldog, and that comes from the upcoming set live from Milan. Thank you, Joel. Los Angeles-based melodic metal group Fate Destroyed has a new music video for Break Free. Spock's Beard and Roy Stoltz, the Flower Kings Revisited, a neat take on the Flower Kings, are going to embark on a tour together in Europe, and they are going to have Spock's Beard, Mike Thorne from Saga on drums. Thank you, Joel. Beasto Blanco's Chuck Garrick had this to say in an interview with Rodrigo. Alice Cooper is thrilled with what we do musically. That was a neat interview. Go check that out. River Sea has the Tide album review done by Jordan. Jordan writing reviews for us. Now, that's very exciting. Gruesome's Matt Harvey. Our goal was to make an album that sounded like sides 3 and 4 of Death's Spiritual Healing. In that interview with Rodrigo, that was a really neat band. I suggest checking the interview out. It's a really unique band. Like, it's a tribute band, but not. They're doing original music, but in the vein of the old band. It's cool. Lord of the Lost releases official video for second single Morgana. Thank you, Joel. And finally, Mark Boardman has a review out of Book 2 by Rausch, an album I enjoy and suggest you check out. All right, so let's see who we have with us this evening. As he often does, joining us is Mr. Gonzo. Hello.
Indeed!
Indeed. And this will be good for the two main topics we have here tonight, because he writes for Prog, which is appropriate for one of our topics, and he writes for Metal Injection, which is very appropriate for another one of our topics. Mr. Jordan Blum is once again joining us.
Hello!
And as a special guest this evening, he plays guitar for Edge of Reality. He plays guitar for Kyros. Joining us once again on Talking Perspectives, it is Mr. Joey Frevola.
Hey guys, hey, how you going? How's it going?
Okay. Weird intros are his thing, apparently.
Prepare the virgins!
Weird intro.
All right. So, our first topic today is one that I think we are all going to have quite a bit to say something about. Coming out the same day that this episode is going to be released on June 22nd on Inside Out is the first ever live album from Haken entitled L-1VE, made up like the old VHS and cassette formats, easily pronounced live, of course. It follows the band as they wrap up their 10th anniversary tour and is something that fans had been clamoring about for a long time. Now, Joey, along with me, I know, you saw this tour or the Affinity tour and 10th anniversary tour a lot, so I think you just have heard the audio, but what did you think?
I enjoyed it. It's definitely not the best sounding live DVD in my opinion, mix-wise, but it's still great just to hear them play live. They've gotten so much tighter as a band since I started following them.
All right. Jordan, what were your initial thoughts?
In terms of just the audio or the whole thing?
As the whole thing is fine.
The audio sounds really good. From what I could tell, the video was fine. I just thought, in terms of the video, I didn't think there was really a lot to keep, to persuade you to watch instead of just listen to it, because it's a very small stage. So I found like a lot of the angles were kind of too close up, or they're from behind the band, so you couldn't really see them playing. But audio-wise, it was great. It was a great mixture of songs from their career. So,
all right, and one of these freaking weeks, I'm going to remember this on every topic. But I make this stuff up, and I'm gonna play it. Damn it! So yes, I was very excited for this release, and that's probably a little loud, so I'm gonna turn that down just a tad. But Falling Back to Earth was always a favorite of mine. I'm so happy to see it on this. My reaction to this release is twofold. One, I am very happy just that we're getting live Haken, as I think everybody is. It is something the fans have been clamoring for quite a while, and even in the notes here it says both the band and the label were inundated with emails requesting a live release in some shape or form, and it was actually rather flattering. So giving the people what they wanted just felt like the right thing to do. And I think the audio sounds very good. I agree with Jordan on that. But I also agree with them in that you really have to temper your expectations on the video. It was done with a lot of handheld cameras, very shaky at times. The lighting is not great for it, and even goes as far as to often wash out the different shots. I mean, it's nice to have, but anybody expecting a really nice looking pro shot video, if you go into it with that expectation, you're going to be disappointed. And I'm kind of sad that we're finally getting this, but there is that but in there that keeps it from being as good as it could be. But still, it is definitely better than nothing. Joey, did you have any personal highlights in the set?
The aquarium melody was pretty interesting, or Aquarius melody, I should. Medley.
It's the Aqua medley.
Yeah.
God.
I mean, medleys aren't the ideal form to hear music in my opinion, but I'm happy we got something.
What is the ideal form to hear music in, Joey?
In its original intended compositional structure. As John Petrucci once said, play the whole damn song.
Yes. But I have to agree, Aqua Medley was definitely one of the highlights for me, and one of the reasons that I'm so glad this particular tour was filmed, because I've always been a huge fan of the first album. That is so well documented at this point. And so to hear that nice big chunk, about 25 minutes from Aquarius, is huge. I would have loved if Celestial Elixir in full had gotten on there, or was a bonus track from another show, but I am quite happy with what's there. And because we so often do this, we very often go back and kind of give a background on bands to give an idea of where I come from with Haken. I have seen them, and now I'm in America, which they only started coming here after the Mountain, or more accurately after Restoration, I guess. Aside from one show at Prague Power early on, I've now seen them 17 times, 18, something like that. So I'm up there in my Haken. There's 2 bass drum heads for Affinity that were made, and one of them is hanging on my wall, and the other is on Ray's wall. So I've got some Haken cred, I would say. So I was very, very excited for this release. Now, Jordan, any particular
Nick,
high points for you?
You should be the high priest for this.
Probably Cockroach King, because I love...
Really? Really?
I
Mr.
love
Generic
Vocal
Boy?
Rose. Huh?
That is the most generic thing you could have picked.
I love Vocal Rose. I love the Gentle Giants, Box Beard, Echo Lynn kind of Vocal Row. So that's an easy one. Architect, really like. Affinity, I really like. I don't know. I like it all.
Yeah.
It all goes together well.
Now, Gonzo, you were trying to sneak a comment in there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you a lot better now.
I said that you should be the high priest of the Church of Haken.
I believe that would be a good title. No, Jordan brought up the Architect, and I will say this. There's 2 things that I experienced on tour that I thought were really brought out by this DVD. One is that the Architect is a great, great live song. I think it is elevated by the stage. And the other is they should never play Earthrise again. I love Earthrise, the song. I love the studio version. It never did when I saw it live. It does not on the DVD. I don't think it comes across well live. I don't know. Does anybody else agree with that?
It didn't stick out to me in particular.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm alone in that, and they can keep playing it then. But
I think you were more of a die-hard fan, maybe. You pay attention to more than we do, maybe. Even though we like them, too.
Yeah. So let me go back here and show one other element that I found odd from the press release here. The release of an official live material is a project that is long overdue, and we knew our existing fans have been crying out for this for some time now. Whilst we have filmed and recorded many shows in the past, we have always felt there were elements of our shows that could be improved visually before we documented and immortalized this for the world to see, and the timing for a live release never felt right for us. While I agree that the timing for a live release coming up to 10th anniversary is right, but if they're looking to get things visually correct, I come back to it like I would like it to look better. It really seems odd to me that I know they're not the biggest band in the world, but I just wish it looked a little better. I know Joey hasn't seen it, but Jordan, am I overreaching in my hopes here?
No, I mean the thing about like I think it's good that they show the band playing because I never like concert films. Like there's that the song remains the same. I think it is where it's like interspersed with like other random footage. So I think it's good that they keep the footage on the band, but it's like a lot of, as I said, like the angles to me are sometimes like too close or they're intrusive or they just interrupt. I don't know the joy of just watching them play. And I agree with what you're saying with the colors being washed out. So yeah, from a visual standpoint, it's not horrible, but it's nothing to excite you.
Yeah. Joey, you had a comment?
Yeah, it's really interesting that they even said that, considering the things you're saying. And I've seen the tracks they released to the public, like the pre-tracks, like they released in memoriam, I believe, like the video on YouTube.
Yeah, and they've also done the Endless Knot since.
Yeah, so I've seen like the general thing looks like, and it's interesting that they would make those comments, and yet that's the thing that they put out. Because I agree, it's nothing special at all visually, let alone from a stage show perspective or even a filming perspective. So I don't understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, and one question, now here's the odd thing in the way this could happen. We're recording this on a Monday. I'm speaking to Ray on Wednesday, and there's a good chance that the interview with Ray could get released before this episode. But I'm going to ask Ray, and this may not make sense when it all comes out in that order, but I was fortunate enough to see the second disc, which wasn't part of the promo, which was the Prague Power 2016 performance. And in a lot of ways, it looks a lot better. Now, I know they say in the release here that despite battling with some technical issues, the show went on, so to speak, and here we have handpicked our favorite 4 tracks from that performance. So maybe that's what kept that from being the main show, but in my mind, as I'm watching it, I can't help but think why Prague Power wouldn't be the main show with the bonus tracks coming from Amsterdam. So that's something I'm definitely going to ask about. Because audio-wise, you can say one way or another, but I think video-wise, no doubt that the Prague Power performance looks a little better, I thought. But that's something that will be discussed. And speaking of the set list, it's one interesting note. My one disappointment in the set list, not just in general stuff they didn't play, but one song they were playing regularly, and it didn't get included, was Deathless. And I believe the reason is because they were playing it all tour on the Affinity tour, but then when it came time to play Prague Power, they had to cut one song for time, and as at that time they knew that they would be coming back the following year and playing Visions in its entirety, it of course made sense to cut Deathless. But over the course of seeing that many times on tour, it became a favorite in the set for me. So I was sad to see that missing, but otherwise, they hit a lot of their really strong stuff, and I can't really complain too much about what they did and did not include. Of course, there's personal preferences and things, but you got such high energy live tracks as 1985 and the Endless Knot off the new one, Cockroach King, like Jordan said, and Falling Back to Earth, which are both huge live songs. The Architect, which again, huge live song. Same thing with In Memoriam. It is really a high energy show. It has one break in it really for As Death Embraces, but otherwise, it's a really high energy, great live show. I thought.
Yeah, if I may, I'd like to go back to the bit about the quality of the video. I work in photography, and part of my work, I work with a lot of videographers. The advances that have been made in contemporary cameras in the past few years is just ridiculous. Just in the past 5 or 6 years, we have been able to ditch the those big, cumbersome, heavy things that you'd have to rest on your shoulders to get only decent video, to like tiny little mirrorless rangefinders that use the same lenses that I would use on any of my non-video gear and take stunning video with it at low light. And there are plenty of services out there that I'm sure would be happy to record a concert by a band as good as Haken, and do an incredible job at it. So, I really don't understand what the excuse was with that. And it also kind of reminds me of Fate's Warning's Live in Athens DVD, which doesn't look great either, but that was a little over 10 years ago. The technology hadn't, the technology was certainly there to shoot great video in low light, but these days I don't think there's really an excuse for that. Not when you're in a band that has the budget to do these sorts of things, presumably. I mean, they're probably the biggest band on Inside Out, aside from Fates Warning and Dream Theater themselves. So I'm just from that standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's so inexpensive to make great looking video these days.
Yeah, go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, just to sort of add to that. I mean, I saw the tour in September in Philly at the Fillmore, which I think, Nick, you probably know about that place.
Yeah, I was there, yes.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. so unless I wasn't watching the actual live release closely enough, I wonder why they didn't pick a bigger venue to shoot at. Like, granted, as you said, like, they're not huge, so they're not like a stadium band by any means, but you would think that the possibilities of what they could do, even in terms of like spectacle on the stage, was so limited that I wonder why they chose to either film this one or to play there if they knew they were going to film it.
Yeah, and it was the last show of the tour, so that could have been, part of it, and that they felt they were going to be at their absolute best at that point. That could have very well played into it. And the other thing is, I don't have a problem with the size of the venue necessarily. I think it showed a nice, energetic, tight crowd. Wasn't the most active crowd, but it was a nice, intimate show. I like that feel of it. But just the lighting in that particular room did not lend itself to filming. And again, I don't want to sound ungrateful or unhappy. I do think this captures a good Haken performance. I do think it sounds really good. I do enjoy watching it. It's just if you play this and then play, for example, because we're talking about later, the new Devin Townsend live show, it's just going to be night and day, the difference. Coming from two guys on the same label, ironically. So that just seems, it's going to seem a little off compared to that. And, the Similitude of a Dream tour just came out, and it's going to look off compared to that. And I know Haken's not on the level of either of those two. So there is some reasoning there. But it still is going to stand out coming out against those releases, I think.
No, for sure.
So that was our discussion on the new Haken Live album, due out on June 22nd via Inside Out. And now we are going to be moving on to a new segment here at Talking Perspectives. This was Gonzo's idea, and so we're going to be starting with one of his bands. But we're going to be doing a segment every now and again called Forgotten Bands. These are bands that we think should have been bigger than they were, didn't get the notoriety they deserved, and so we want to give them a little bit of time in the limelight and talk about them and hopefully introduce them to a few more people. So Gonzo, why don't you introduce us to our first band and our guest this evening?
Thanks, Nick. I will do that. We're kicking off the Forgotten Band series today with a band that I think deserves all the recognition Opeth has gotten. You've seen this guy in Act of Defiance with members of Megadeth and Shadows Fall, and before that, you probably saw him scarf Mark and Joey not paying. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the guy that has as many names as he has talents, Mr. Henry Derek Ellis Bonner. Say hi, dude.
Howdy. Yeah, man. It's I keep extending the names. I thought about changing it officially, but I think I'm just gonna keep adding on to it.
I think you've got almost as many names as I do by this point.
Yeah, man.
Next step is the artist formerly known as, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool, Derek.
Let's not go there.
So, Mr. Henry Derek, we've got you on today to talk about your very, very first band. Can you, before we delve into deeply into that though, can you give us a brief overview before we get into the details?
Well, the first band I started, I guess 96, somewhere around there, 96, 97. We put out a couple of demos, and I just couldn't find anyone to play with. I was really influenced by a lot of European, Scandinavian bands, but a lot of atmospheric kind of black metal stuff from Finland and Norway, and all the stuff that kind of became popular much later on, and now it's seems to be cool to like that stuff. But when I started out, I couldn't find anyone that was really into it, so I started tape trading, and this was in South Georgia. So I started tape trading with just people, kids from all over the world, people from I remember getting demo tapes from a lot of the bands that became pretty popular later on, or at least made a name for themselves. And then from there I just started putting out ads and started trying to like really kind of find other like-minded people. And
And it's worth noting real quick that this was South Georgia, so the internet didn't come around until about 2008, which really made this a lot more difficult.
Man, it was looking back, it's like had I actually known what I was doing or what I was getting myself into, I wish somebody would have just told me, like, look, man, just don't even bother with this whole like music thing, especially this kind of stuff. It's like not something that anyone's ever gonna latch onto. You know what I mean? But I was stubborn then. I'm just as stubborn now.
I'm kind of grateful for that, because like what you're saying right there about don't do this, we would have missed out on a lot of wonderful music. I became aware of Lilitu around the time that the Earth Gods came out. I didn't actually hear Lilitu until I met you and Jason, your old guitar player.
Yeah.
And you guys gave me a copy of Memorial for review in the fall of 2001. And I remember thinking at the time that the material on that album was some of the most polished and forward-thinking death metal I had ever heard from a band that nobody knew about. It reminded me of the epic and foreboding progressive stylings of Opeth, and the melancholic doom of Catatonia, and it still retained an identity that was very much its own. It didn't sound derivative. It didn't sound like it was borrowing. It just kind of like recalled those other sounds. And like now that album is almost old enough to vote, it's still the best independent release that I've ever heard. So,
thanks, man. It's something I don't think about. I mean, to be honest with you, I can't even listen to it. Because I'm just very self-conscious and very critical of myself, especially, I hear all the mistakes, and I hear where I was at that time. And, it's not something that I ever think about, but I do appreciate it. And I get a good amount of people that reach out to me regarding that record, and it's something that, again, I have kind of, I guess I almost just completely forgot about it. But it's cool. It's cool, like, to hear, it's cool anytime anyone like has any kind words to share regarding that material. But it's also kind of like bittersweet too, because we never got to make, the kind of record we wanted to make.
Yeah, and it was something you see a lot, and it goes across any genre that's new, is you'll see these one or two bands that break and make it big, and at the same time, you'll really dig and you'll find these bands that were just as innovative from the time but never got discovered and never had that break. And it's just like you can listen to them side by side, the early material, and there's sometimes no rhyme or reason as to, okay, why did they break and we didn't. And it has to be tough just to see other bands that managed to make more out of it, but you did everything that you could with it and didn't quite, get that break.
Sure. I mean, it's not because we didn't go for it. We did. We got to the point where we had record labels courting us. We had, we got a lot further than I thought we would have, to be honest, especially considering where we came from. And, we didn't know what we were doing. We just knew that we had a passion for what we were doing. And, when labels kind of started showing interest, we did what they wanted them. We took their suggestions and we did what any young band would have done at the time.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, like the first thing was the name. Labels didn't like the name. They didn't like the fact that it was, it wasn't marketable. And, again, right there, that should have been like the first red flag, you know what I mean? Because we weren't like the type of band that we weren't going for like a modern metal or macho metal kind of sound. Like, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like bands at the time that labels tried to pair us up with. Maybe like a band like Trivium, you know what I mean? Like, we weren't going for that sound. We weren't trying to be like an American modern day macho version of that. We really were tapping into the more like, like you said, more like melodic, progressive kind of European stylings of the more metal spectrum. So, we just got like, it just seemed like a lot of people just didn't really get it, but they liked the music enough that they wanted to at least try to mold us into something that they could work with,
Mm-hmm.
But I still, to this day, I appreciate that. A lot of people did take note, they did take interest, and in a perfect world, we would have gone on to make a mark, a mark bigger than we made. But and then like eventually I put the guitar down. Some A&R guy, I won't mention his name, but he doesn't matter because there's no such thing as an A&R guy now. I think that whole thing's a joke anyway. But he suggested I put down the guitar and that I become more of a front man, and and honestly, that's kind of one of the things to this day that I don't regret it, but it definitely took a toll on me because I'm a guitar player first. I never ever wanted to become a vocalist or a front man. You know what I mean? It's just something. It's like if you're an actor and you have that one, kind of eureka moment that like, oh wow, I could actually do this, and I want to prove to myself that I can do it, and then it's like before you know it, you're typecast as being that guy. So for me, that's more or less what kind of happened. And it's like, no, now I kind of come to the realization that, what, I'm not that guy, but I can do a lot of different types of things. And at the end of the day, I'm not a one trick pony. You cannot. A lot of people still make the mistake of trying to put me, they try to put a tag on me, and they think that they understand exactly what it is I do. But the only thing I want to do, the only thing I'm interested in doing is being creative, and being a vocalist, being a front man. That's kind of like just one facet of it. You know what I mean? But I know I'm rambling here and you guys are limited on time, but that's just a few examples of what happened, when we kind of had that small window of opportunity.
Yeah, and one thing, I know that, you're Lilitu, of course, that wasn't able to continue on, but one name that I saw when Gonzo sent me a bunch of information that just completely surprised me is a man that I've been a fan of now for a few years. I had no idea. Jonah Weingarten, early on was with you guys, and I was just shocked to see that. So, he has since gone on and used that, early start and, done things with, he's now working with Matt Barlow, of all people, along with Tara Mays and Pierre Mays. So, it did springboard, at least him to continue and do things through all these years, which is kind of cool, at least.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jonah's awesome, but Jonah's always been very driven. He's very, since I've known him, he's always been passionate about music, and you can't. I mean, nothing is gonna deter an artist, from doing what it is that they do, and he's just a true artist in the sense that he's just gonna be true to himself, you know what I mean, and he just wants to be creative and make music, and that's kind of what I was trying to get at. It's like, I mean, he's not a one trick pony either, but at the same time, it's like he's always. I think he's someone that he understands, like, you have to be open-minded, and you have to, like, in order to get opportunities, and you have to take those opportunities and just see where it goes. You know what I mean? And he did kind of take that leap with, when he joined my band as well.
Mm-hmm.
I remember telling my ex way back in the day that it had looked like you'd broken up with your girlfriend and written a whole album about it. And she said, "Oh my God, how emo." And then I told her that it was called the Dolores Legion. And then I let her hear it, and she changed her tune. Can you tell us a little bit about that album?
Well, yeah. Well, the Dolores Legion, it's interesting. The title track, it's based on an actual person. I knew this girl. Her name was Dolores. I didn't know very much about her. I met her very briefly in a psychiatric hospital that I grew up next to. And I've told this story before, but I don't think I've really told it to that many people. So, yeah, I'm not embarrassed about it. Like it's one of those things where it was like a growing pain for me. And I was I'm kind of a, eccentric person, but I was definitely a weird kid. On my 18th birthday, I admitted myself into Central State Hospital, which at one time was the largest psychiatric facility in the entire world. Milledgeville was the place. That's where I'm born. That's where I was born. That's where I'm from. Born and raised. That's where Lilitu started. Anyway, long story short, that was my birthday present to myself. And yeah, I met this. She was a real person I met. She had we weren't, romantic or anything, but I kind of wrote this fictional story about her, and a lot of the material on that album actually came out of that experience. So, I know it's kind of strange, but at the same time, it's one of those things where my most of my family worked there at this hospital, so I had like this morbid fascination with this place, and like the content just kind of, I guess, like really did coincide with the music and the way I was writing at that time. And in terms of like girlfriend drama, I don't think there was really, I don't think there was much of that. I mean, there's always some of that, like I think around that age, but
Yeah, it kind of sounded like that. I mean, it just sounded like an uneducated guess from somebody that has been in a number of strange relationships themselves. But thank you, thanks for talking about that, for sharing that with us.
yeah, of course, man. It was an interesting time, and like I said, I've always had this strange relationship with this place, with this hospital, growing up in close proximity to it, and my family working there, and then like just meeting this one person there, really like became the catalyst for that particular record. But I don't know, it's interesting how like real life it can influence, have such a big impact on your creativity. And I think that's why I value like life experience more than anything. It's like you have all these like rock stars that they have so much money and so much. I mean, they live in like this alternate universe where I just have to wonder. It's like, what's I don't know. I think as an artist, man, as a creative person, you have to value your life experiences, but you have to live life. You have to go out there and really, I don't know, just live your life. And I think that's where the greatest art comes from.
So shortly after Dolores came out and you guys toured, I think you guys toured with God Dethroned, right?
We did this wacky tour, man, with God Dethroned and Night Rage and Leaves Eyes were on some shows, and then has a couple other like bands that were just like really not worth talking about. But yeah, and that was a cool experience for us for sure, because it just, I unfortunately, it was just kind of a disaster. It was a nightmare. Like, the promoter was just a complete fuck up, and I mean, every band has those stories, of their early tours. But like for us, this was supposed to be a big thing. I still to this day like feel really bad for God Dethrone, because that was their first U.S. tour, and they just really got put through the ringer. And some shows like they didn't even get to play. So it's like there were so many bands on the bill that it was just ridiculous. But yeah, that was a great experience for us, because we were hungry back then. We were ready for it, really. You know what I mean? It's like when you're young and you don't have all these responsibilities, you can go out and just without a care in the world. And that's not to say we didn't have, some responsibilities, and we were definitely worried about like how we were going to pay bills when we got home, but it wasn't such a weight that it is now, and that a lot of people, they don't even take that into consideration with bands. It's like a lot of, especially there's so many bands that go out there and just sacrifice everything for the sake of the music and for the fans and just because they love doing it, but then they're just poor, and we were poor, but like I said, I think that's why it was such a joyful experience, because we didn't have that weight. We didn't have like those major, responsibilities like weighing us down.
So one last question before we move on to the next topic. Somewhere between that tour and about 4 or 5 years ago, when you resurfaced in Act of Defiance, like, can you let us know what happened in between then? Like, how did you end up, with, between Lilitu and Act of Defiance today? Like, what happened there?
Well, there was definitely a window of time when I was in Atlanta, like after the demise of that, my first band, that I just couldn't get it together. I like went through this major depression trying to figure out like, how I was going to continue just being a musician, because, some people are under the assumption that like, okay, if you're a musician or if you're a painter or a writer or director or whatever, if you're a creative person and, your this passion that you have doesn't work out, and that for some reason, you're just left, trying to like, I don't know, work like some dead end job or whatever. There's this assumption that like, okay, well, that's what you're supposed to do. And, I've never subscribed to that at all. And matter of fact, it's like I made a vow, I mean, it's like this very poetic kind of romantic way of thinking, but I made a vow to myself that, I would never turn my back on what it is I truly want to do and what I'm passionate about. And I don't like, there's not anything I want to do. There are very few things on this, like, in my life that matter. Music is always number one. It's always been there. It's always been, when no one else was there, it's been number one. And it's like, for me to turn my back on that would be an ultimate betrayal. So, I made a vow to myself that I just would never do it. So even, when I finally like, I was comatose, it was like from this depression for, I don't know, like it seemed like it just lasted forever. Like I'm not going to say it was like a decade, but it was a long time before I was able to really, get it together. And then eventually moved to Los Angeles with some contacts that I had. Crazy story. I came out here. My first gig was with, was trying to put together a project with Rob Caggiano, who was in Anthrax at the time. And we had originally supposed to be me and Rob, and then my friend Tom, who was in Gorgoroth at the time, he went on to do Godspeed. We had yeah, and we had John Tempesta on drums, but he had like just got the gig in the Cult, so that I moved here and the whole thing fell apart. So if you can imagine that, it was like, it was just bad timing. And after that, there were a few other dead end projects that did not happen for whatever reason. I mean, there's always a reason, but like, I'm not one of those people that I don't. Yes, I think things happen for a reason. No, I don't think everything happens for a reason. You know what I mean? In this case, it's just bad timing. It's bad timing, and then politics come into play as well. So, and ultimately, I kind of figured out it doesn't really matter who's involved. There's just so many variables. There's so many pieces of the puzzle that have to be there at that given time. You know what I mean? So, yeah, after a few other dead end projects, Scar the Martyr thing fell into my lap, and at first, like, to be honest, I just had no real interest. I've never really cared about nu metal, or I guess I just don't really. I'm not a fanboy, and I don't care about like any kind of like that stuff. Just isn't relevant to me. But it's interesting just because like Tom was the one who got me involved in that. He was originally supposed to be a part of it. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think Joey and I did have like a kinship there, and we actually did connect musically. It's like sometimes I mean, I think people are people, and you come from different walks of life, but like everyone has things in common. I think we just tried to like really find what our common ground was. So it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna rock it, and see what happens. And like I was saying earlier, it's like just trying to take an opportunity that is there, and it just see where it goes. And from there, it's like, I don't know what should have been like probably the greatest experience of my entire life, being on a major label at the time, which was Roadrunner. Bad timing for Roadrunner because they had already gotten bought by I don't know what it was, Warner, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it's like looking back at it was overall a great experience, and I'm glad I got to do it. I'm glad I got to make a record, and for me that was like one of the labels that I grew up with, and I always wanted to be on that label, you know what I mean? But then again, it's very different. I grew up listening to like, all the classic death metal bands that were Roadrunner, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like the Road Racer, like the Pestilence and Deicide and like,
Obituary and Cynic and all that.
Of course, all the gnarly stuff that is like, legendary, like classic now. But yeah, man, I mean, to answer your question, that's how it happens, and then from there, I think, what happened was Stephanie, Chris Broderick's girlfriend, saw me play, actually the last show at Harry Potter World, it was Universal Theater, which is now, part of Universal City, which now is officially Harry Potter Land. Yeah, it's like who needs music and venues? You know what I mean? Let's just bulldoze them all down so we can build entertainment, for people like that just have no interest in music. I don't know. So anyway, Stephanie saw me play at this particular venue. We were opening for Danzig, I believe. Yeah, Danzig and Huntress. That was the tour, and then Scar the Martyr. Yeah, and she just happened to remember me, so she recommended me for the Act of Defiance thing, and that's how that came to be. I did some demos, and I know that they had a bunch of singers they were receiving demos from, and it's just one of those things. Just like I just knew it. It's like, okay, I'm gonna knock this out of the park. You know what I mean? And I don't know, just another notch on my belt, I suppose. Just. I don't know. It's like one of those things. It's like, okay, I'm going to prove to myself I can do it, and I need something to do. I like I like the music, and yeah, let's see where it goes. And so we're going out here pretty soon with Armored Saint, and that should be fun. We're doing a run with them and support of their Symbol of Salvation tour, their reunion tour.
Nice.
Anniversary tour, I should say, for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll be playing all the festivals in Europe, and then I come back here, and then I'm going to try to get everything ready for my solo record that I'm putting out. So hopefully I can get that out before the fall, I hope.
Excellent. Well, I'm really grateful that you listened to those inner voices that were telling you not to give up, because you look like you're doing some pretty cool stuff even now, man. And I'm really happy for you, and I'm grateful that you're doing what you're doing.
Cheers, man. Well, I appreciate it. You know what I mean? I it's all about trying to like fulfill, that kind of calling. But at the same time, without people like you, man, without people that really reach out and that care and that actually take the time to express that, you know what I mean? It'd be a completely different experience for me, so it's always cool to hear from people that actually do take the time to care about the art.
Well, we're grateful for it, man.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Nick, what's up?
All right, so that is our wrap on our first forgotten band, Lilitu, and of course Henry filled us in on what he has going into the future here. And I have to quick make a personal note and apologize for having gone to Harry Potter World. I'm sorry. I feel bad about that now, but we had a good time.
Butterbeer is delicious.
But we're going to move on now to our next topic, and it is a band that Henry's going to join us for because it's one that he and the rest of us all know, and it is this gentleman. It is Mr. Devin Townsend, and he has on July 6th a new DVD, Blu-ray, CD set coming out to mark the 20th anniversary of Ocean Machine. It is Ocean Machine Live at the Ancient Roman Theater Plovdiv. And not only that, we have a interview that's going to be posted in the next few days. It'll probably be out before this, that Gonzo did, and I also joined with like 2 questions on for Devin. It was great to speak with him. Half hour was certainly not enough. I feel like we could have probably talked to him for 2 hours and still had plenty to talk about. He's a very interesting fellow. But let's talk about this new live release. I know we haven't heard from Joey or Jordan, so let's start with Jordan. What do you think of the new set?
I think it's fantastic. Devin Townsend is one of the few modern artists, and I've told him this actually, that I would say is a genius. He's the closest thing to a modern Frank Zappa, I think, despite his humility of saying like, no, he's not. But I think through the release, I think it's fantastic. It's much deserved. It's a very eclectic set list, and I agree that I was surprised that it was so expansive. I thought it would just be, at the most, Ocean Machine as the primary thing, the first thing, and then a few, after an intermission, a bonus set list of, 20 minutes or something. But no, it's a long one, and it just covers like everything, pretty much everything I think about his solo career that makes it so special.
Mm-hmm. Joey?
I love Devin Townsend so much, and I love this release as well. All his live DVDs
in like a musical way or a sexual way. I'm unsure.
To be honest, his bald head haunts my sleep.
Continue.
But no, like this is.
You got something against bald? What's going on?
his last, just all the live things he's ever released have been incredible, and this is no exception. And I love the set list. It was really cool to hear all the orchestra stuff.
Yeah,
I love. It's so good.
And even though Devin is one of the people whose harsher vocals I enjoy more than most, this set was not heavy on that, and so I certainly enjoyed it a good bit. And I mean, that first set, the first 12 songs done with the orchestra, was a great selection of songs. There should be no doubt that, it was a fan pick set list, but it's not like they just went with the 12 most popular songs, I would say. They pick some interesting ones and some good ones for an orchestra in there. So I think even that said, take the Ocean Machine, part of it out of there. The first set, just as a live release, I think would have been quite solid all on its own. Gonzo, what do you think?
Well, first I want to make Joey a little jealous because he seems to be in love with Devin in a rather filthy way. Devin personally told me and Nick to suck it.
That he did. That'll be in the interview.
Did you? Did you?
No, it's hard to do that over the phone. You know that.
Oh. You let that detail out. I'm mad now.
So like about this new live set, the thing about Devin is that he has such an enormous catalog. Don't get your mind excited there, Joey. He's got such an enormous catalog that he could play for 3 hours and still ignore half his discography. Yeah. And like as many times as I've seen Devin, he plays pretty long sets, and there's always you're never going to hear all of your favorite stuff that he's done, whether it's a solo stuff or strapping, whatever. You're just not going to hear it all because there is so much of it, and so much of it is so good. Like, I was a little disappointed to not hear, like at Prague Power a couple years ago, he had Anneke van Giersbergen on as a guest. She was there for the whole
amazing
set. It was incredible, and I thought for sure that I was going to hear Sky Blue, and they didn't play Sky Blue, and I almost cried.
But we did get EA, and that was pretty amazing.
We did get EA, that was fantastic.
Now, I will say this, with Devin, my history is very black and white. It seems whenever he puts out an album as Devin Townsend or Devin Townsend Project, I either seem to love it or hate it, and there's very little in between. So if I could pick out a set list and have him ignore half his discography, I would just be perfectly set if I could pick which ones. But Henry, what do you think of the new set?
Well, first of all, I just want to chime in what you just said. I'm not like a Devin fanboy. Although I will say I've met him in person, and he's an awesome dude. Personally, he's a great guy. Ocean Machine, in my personal opinion, is the best thing he's ever done. Like, but I'm gonna go as far as to say it's the best thing he ever will do, because I haven't heard anything else in his entire discography that I like half as much as that record. That record just has a vibe about it that he hasn't captured, or maybe he doesn't want to. That's fine. I mean, he does a lot of different types of stuff, and the one thing I do like about him is that you can't really try to put him in one small little box. You know what I mean? Having said that, I like the Ocean Machine stuff. I kind of checked out, I skipped around with some of the other tracks. Bad Devil's like one of the worst songs I've ever heard in my entire life. I don't even understand. Oh yeah, people love it. I just don't, I can't get behind that. Like that side of him, I really want nothing to do with. But the more melodic, more like mournful kind of personal songs like the Ocean Machine stuff, even some of his solo stuff I really, really, really enjoy. But to be honest, I did ignore some of the other stuff on the disc, on the three disc, I should say.
That's okay. I've ignored stuff that has even if there are some people I've discussed music with over the years, and if they could hear me what I've praised about Devin since, they would be in shock, because I've come down pretty hard on a lot of his material in the past. Kai, I think, is one of the worst albums ever recorded. I truly don't like that album, and a lot of
that's one of the ones. That's one of the ones I remember hearing and just really being on the fence, completely. Mm. But I've been out of the loop with this stuff too, because he's been pretty prolific, or so it seems. I haven't been able to really latch on to a lot of stuff. I love Strapping Young Lad, more than a lot of his others. I mean, obviously it's completely different. It's much of a heavier kind of thing, but sonically, it's just more interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just had to refute what you were saying about Key, and say that the title track Key, I think, is one of few songs that single-handedly demonstrate him as a complete genius in terms of how that song builds measure after measure. But I agree, it's not one of his, I don't think Key is one of his best, but like Winter and Train 5, I don't know. It's his like post, the Devin Townsend project started there with, and then, the Addicted, and after that was like his post kind of like, I don't know, drugs and
Ziltoid.
yeah, like Ziltoid is him at his fullest, like just manic, skull it, and then Key is sort of like a therapy thing for him, especially Ghost after that.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. It was with Addicted. I really like Addicted. The next album, not so much, but then we came back. We skipped one, but got to Epic Cloud, and I love Epic Cloud. It was one of my favorite albums from that year. So it's weird how he goes back and forth for me. Gonzo, you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this discussion exemplifies one of the genius things about Devin. I mean, he tackles so many different styles in his own way. I mean, like, he did the Casualties of Cool thing, which was like almost like acoustic country weirdness, and and it got a really good response from people that know a thing or two about that style of music. I think that it's a testament to his creativity, and I'd also like to mention that his most recent album with the Devin Townsend project, Transcendence, which came out in 2016, I think rivals Ocean Machine in how excellent it is. I don't know if I like it more than Ocean Machine or not, but the fact that he's still cranking out such fantastic stuff all these years into his career speaks very well for him.
Now, one thing I would say about the new set, and I mentioned it in our interview, how he specifically says he keeps himself more reserved for that show. He tried to turn down the Devin silliness style a little bit, given the gravity of the orchestra and the venue and all that. And while it came out to be a fantastic show, it was missing that element that is why I will always happily, no matter what I think of Devin, his most recent album, anything like that, I will always be happy to see Devin on a bill, on a cruise, at a festival, anything like that, because the man knows how to put on a live performance. Studio, again, no matter what I think, I will always be happy if I can make it to see him live, because he just puts on such a fantastic show. And part of that was seen, like I say, in the new set, aside from a lot of his more vulgar jokes and things like that. But he is such a good showman, and I just love, I enjoy seeing him live, and I at least will always have that, despite what I think of his music at the time.
Nah, you don't go to a Devin Townsend performance and walk away not entertained in some way. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I have to touch on that for a moment. Because I know it sounds like I was probably being a hater earlier, but here's the thing: it's like I would compare him to a Frank Zappa, but I don't like all of Frank Zappa's stuff either. I think you know what I mean. It's like Devin is a mad scientist. You can call him a genius if you want. I'm gonna stick with that. He's a mad scientist. He can do anything he wants to do, and do it fairly well. And yeah, he's a great performer. He's an amazing entertainer. He's kind of like the total package when it comes to a composer, or a musician, or someone who that can just do it all. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen him live where he just ripped solos out of his ass, just improv. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of improvisation, man, it goes far beyond, creativity. It comes from a somewhere else. I don't know, because it wasn't like Amateur Night at the Apollo. You know what I mean? It was like some really heavy kind of stuff going on there. And he's definitely a special artist, man. I don't know. I mean, yeah, because I was thinking about this earlier, and the only person I could compare him to that I would probably be comfortable comparing him to would be Frank Zappa. But Frank Zappa was just as humble, he'd tell you to go fuck yourself. If you told, like that was just his attitude. It's like, oh, you're a genius, this and that, the other. Like, no, I'm not.
One of the other I just random neat things from watching it too is I love how during the first set the orchestra looks so cramped on stage, and then the Ocean Machine set comes and it feels so barren. It looks there's so much room, and it's such a different vibe between the sets. Obviously the first one has the orchestra now, but just visually, it is a stunning change, I thought, between one set and the next. Jordan?
Yeah, I agree. I don't love everything he's done either. Specifically, it's been a while since I tried to listen to Physicist, but that's the one that I could never get into. But the thing, like the reason I compared him to Zappa, and again, he very much said like, "Oh, that's too much." It's amazing how like on stage he's like a madman, but then behind the scenes he's the most humble, like silly, but like quaint and humble dude. Mm-hmm. But like he'll put like funny lyrics and funny concepts on the surface like Zappa did, but the music beneath it is like super complicated, and just like Zappa got like an orchestra to play 200 Motels and these really weird, like goofy lyrics. That's what he did. But I think another similarity, and I just think in general, a thing that people don't really appreciate as much, that I don't hear people talk about as much with Devin Townsend, is the conceptual, the continuity he has between albums, where he'll like have a lyric from one album appear on another album. Like both Addicted and Deconstruction have the line, "I'm all right to fly, only we both know that we never once were right," I think is the line. And Addicted ends with, get up now, deconstruct. So he like repeats lyrics from album to album. Even there's a Strapping Young Lad song, I forget which one, but has a line that wound up, I think, on Synkestra. And it's just like, and I asked him about it, he said he didn't realize he did that. I'm like, of course you did. But even to that extent, it's just like little Easter eggs of like, it's all his albums almost take place in the same universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at too, like seeing him live. It just seemed like when I said, hey, there are heavier things happening there, that's kind of what I meant. Subconsciously as an artist, maybe he didn't realize he was, going there or repeating himself, lyrically. But I think subconsciously that says something greater, you know what I mean? Like but I appreciate that stuff. I also understand how some people might misinterpret it and think that he's just being lazy.
Mm-hmm. Well, now let me go around here and get some favorite tracks from people. For me, from the first set, Gaia, I hate to say it, Henry, but Bad Devil and Deep Peace were probably personal favorites on my end. Joey, what about you?
Yeah, I love the couple of Terria tracks he did. I think he did Canada as well.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and Higher. I was really excited to hear Higher live because I'd never got to see him play that anywhere. Gonzo?
Oh man, the first two songs on Transcendence slay me every time. Truth, Stormbending, and it's on the tip of my tongue, Failure.
Okay, yep. Tracks 1, 2, and 4 on the live set. And Jordan, how about you?
Probably anything from Synkestra, because I think that's the best thing he's done. That's the first thing I've heard. I think that's the best thing he's done. And Terria, I really like too. And I have to agree with you, Nick. I totally see why Bad Devil is not like the best thing. It's like not, his masterpiece, but it just shows how like, out there and eccentric and just like him or hate him, like he'll just go out there kind of song.
Yeah. Synkestra and Terria were my two favorite that I had heard from Devin Townsend, not the project, but I do have Ocean Machine now sitting in my Amazon cart, so when that comes, that may very well, overtake those, depending on what I think of the studio version as opposed to live. Yeah. But having heard it, first live, that was pretty incredible. I'm very excited to get that studio release here at some point.
I wanted to ask him.
Go ahead, Jordan.
No, I was going to say, I spoke to him on Wednesday, and yeah, we didn't have nearly enough time. The first thing he said to me was, like, he Skyped me and said, "I'm sorry, I have to pee. Give me 2 minutes." I was like, that's such a Devin Townsend thing to do. But I wanted to ask him if he's ever going to do Punky Brewster live, because that's his first album that often forgotten. I don't know what he thinks of it either, but
I love, and it's not just Devin Townsend, but when people are doing these day-long interviews where, they have these 5-hour blocks and half hours scheduled off. It's like, I love when you get artists that just schedule interviews randomly so you get more than the half hour, because so often it's not enough. And of course, then I'll have an artist where it is, I have them for as long as I want, and they give 3-word responses, and the interview's over in 15 minutes. But it is how it is. Henry, any other highlights for you?
Gaia was probably number one for me.
All right, yeah, that, like I said, was one of my favorites as well. And one thing that we should definitely note, how cool was it that he had Squid back, the original bassist, to be able to play the Ocean Machine set, despite his battle with MS. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was our discussion on the new Devin Townsend record, again, out July 6th. It is Ocean Machine live at the Ancient Roman Theater Plovdiv. And so definitely we all recommend that. We're all Devin fans. We all like the performance. And so now we are going to move on to music news. But before that, we are going to say goodbye to Henry, who joined us for this segment. Thank you very much, Henry. And we hope people will be checking out Act of Defiance going into the future for you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Henry. It's always a pleasure hanging out with you, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say real quick, so I thought you guys were breaking down each disc or whatever, but the Ocean Machine disc was by far the one that I was really excited about. So I will be picking up this album when it comes out.
Very nice. Yeah, it's in my card as well. Again, another one that the live set is also waiting, but that doesn't come out till July. So, all right, Henry, have a good night. Thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers, guys. Be good. Take care.
All right. Night, man.
All right, so we are now going to head on to music news for a bit. First off, releases coming out on July 22nd. Of course, the Haken Live DVD and CD that we talked about at the top of the program. The Sea Within, which is an album we discussed on a previous Talking Perspectives, and that we had an interview with Roya Stolt about, and I think review of as well. And also this week I'll be talking to Marco Miniman. So lots and lots of coverage on The Sea Within, and I highly recommend that comes out the same day as this. Marduk with Victoria comes out, and as well as 9 Inch Nails with the Bad Witch EP. And then I have, as usual, some stories for you. Both of these come from our friends at Prague, which again Jordan writes for. He maybe wrote these, I don't know, I didn't check. But one, Roger Waters talks about the making of a 5.1 mix of Animals, which would be very interesting if that does come to fruition. I hope I can end up getting that without having to buy a $140 box set or whatever it ends up being, in which case, screw them. And also a interesting story about Robert Fripp talking about how Brexit may or probably has scuttled the plans for a 50th anniversary Kingdoms Run through Europe. So a neat intersection of music and politics there, if you care to check out that story. So now we are going to go on to our final topic of this evening, and it is one that is going to help us wrap up the year thus far. In the next week or two, we're going to talk about what we're anticipating for the rest of the year. But here we're going to see where we stand so far in 2018, what we thought about the first half. So we have all covered several topics. And Joey, since you're the only one who I forgot to put in the information for, why don't you go ahead and start us off and give us your top 5 of the year so far.
Okay. Well, I can't say there's been a whole lot that have been amazing from this year so far, but I've got 5 albums that I enjoyed to some extent. My favorite of the year so
far.
What
a ringing endorsement.
Yeah, it's been pretty slow this first half for me, but I really enjoyed Sunlux's new album. I don't know if anyone here knows Sunlux. They're kind of... Was that someone about to say something?
We, of course, all know them very well because we're smart and educated people. But just in case we don't, what's the title of that album?
Good question. What was it called? Checking now.
This is the type of quality information brought to you by Talking Perspectives, trademark.
I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, yeah, they're kind of like a They're like a weird electronic, like kind of soul pop, really artsy recording stuff trio that just does some of the sickest stuff I've ever heard. And the new album's awesome. Apart from that, my good friends in Lines in the Sky released Beacon, which I think is a fantastic album.
Yes, and I have that as well. It did not make my top 5, I'm sorry to say, but it would be in my honorable mention list in that 5 to 10 or that 6 to 10 spot if we were doing that. And they at times sound a lot like Coheed and Cambria on their older stuff. I didn't think so much on the new one. They I think a little bit more of a new sound out on it, but very enjoyable. I would suggest it.
I would agree, and I would say whoever wrote that press release for Beacon did a pretty good job with it.
Jordan, did you write that press release?
I may or may not have wrote
the
press release for that.
Okay, I figured I knew where that was going. Continue on, Joey.
I'm not naming names.
Newsbox Beard is solid. It's not one of their best, I don't think, but it still has a lot to like on it. Mm-hmm. Mostly in moments. I wouldn't say. Well, yeah, it has a lot. It still has a lot to listen to. It's definitely worth some listens if you like Spock's Beard.
Yeah, and
but I don't expect it to be as good as the last two, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, and that's another one where we had talked to Ted and we had a review and all that, so we definitely covered a good bit on that album.
Yeah, and first half of Between the Bear and Me's Automata double album single split in two atrocity.
That's not even the better half. Okay, so
I hope so, because I still don't think it's that great, but it is still top 5 for me.
So real quick, we were talking about this last week, and you may have some information. I had heard somewhere that they were forced to split the two up, and that wasn't initially the plan. Is that correct? Are you confirming that for me?
I don't know if it was forced, but I'm pretty sure it was the label owner's idea, and he asked them to do it.
Ha! Vindication. Thank you.
I don't know how Between the Bear and Me felt about it. I don't know if they agreed with him, or if they were like, we don't want to do that, but fine.
Okay. Well, fair enough. I did not just simply pull that out of my butt. It did have... it was something I had heard somewhere. Okay, continue. That's 3 albums.
Nick gets a gold star on his forehead.
Yay, gold star.
And then kind of the 5th one is a toss-up between New Decemberists and Good Tiger, I would say.
Yes.
New Decemberists.
And here it was, I think Jordan was worried about pulling out one album that probably was a little bit outside of our normal realm of discussion.
Yes, I was. And, Joey, I have to call you on that because I think the New Decemberist album is the worst thing they've done. I hate that album. I don't hate that album.
You guys should
I agree.
About it.
It's not, again, I think this year has been pretty bad so far for new music, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So disappointed in whatever, I don't even remember what it's called. But
I'll Be Your Girl, I think it's called.
I would agree that in general, I don't think this year has been off to the strongest start. I think even my top album isn't as strong as it potentially could be. And from there, I don't think everything else, there's nothing really great. There's a lot of really good stuff. But yeah, I agree. It's not the strongest starting year. But Jordan, why don't you give us your top 5?
Sure. Well, my first, my number 1, and again, not necessarily in order, but I have the new Between.
It's not in order, but you called it number 1.
Well, what I wrote down first, the first one that came to mind, so maybe that means something, is actually Automata 2. As we discussed last week, I do like Automata 1. I do think it's kind of like familiar and safe, but Automata 2 like made my jaw drop. It blew me away. It's them going full on like eccentric and epic, and going back to Devin Townsend, specifically the 3rd song, Voice of Trespass, is, as I said last week, like it's a mix of Devin Townsend's Bad Devil and like Diablo Swing Orchestra. Like that's where they go with it, and I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna skip ahead on my list. We're gonna be doing the biggest surprise of the year, and that easily made that spot for me. As was discussed last week, I have pretty much hated most other Between the Buried Me I've heard at one degree or another, and that would have made my honorable mention list. I mean, it is such a good album. So I will agree. I have no problem with that being number 1 on somebody's list.
Yeah. Second one, as I wrote down, is Amorphous, Queen of Time, which is interesting to me. Because I had a friend in college, I'm still friends with him, but he loved Amorphous, and this is like 15 years ago, and he told me I should listen to them, and I never did, but I wanted to review their album for Metal Injection, so I gave it a shot, and it just blew me away, especially the first song, The Bee, has one of my favorite, maybe my favorite like melody of the year, in terms of the chorus, so I really like the new Amorphous album. I also have the new Lunatic Soul, Under the Fragmented Sky, which I think is a great compliment to Fracture. Not as good, but I don't think it's meant to be. I sort of see it as what's the third one? Impressions. What Impressions was to the first two. I see this as like the complement to Fragmented or Fractured and Walking on a Flashlight Beam.
Yeah.
And it's just it just shows Marius is just not just like unique composer. Like nobody writes songs like him. Nobody arranges, and the instrumentation and the voice. He's just one of a kind.
And thank you for having it on your list, because I had seen the news when that was first coming out, but it wasn't available for pre-order yet, and I kind of forgot about it. And as soon as I saw it on your list, I was like, boom, immediately Amazon. Let's scoop that one up that I somehow let slip through.
Yeah, like it's got some like songs on it, but it's more like towards like world music of like the first two albums. It's more like I don't know, out there instrumentation, but it's great. Like everything he does is just great. I think. So number 4, I have the new Gazpacho Soyuz, which Gazpacho, like I don't think it's their best. I think their best is probably Night, which is just a masterpiece, and then March of Ghost. But even really good Gazpacho to me is better than a lot of the best of what's coming out, because they sound so unique and so emotional and so tasteful. And like nobody sounds like Gazpacho.
It's so funny to hear you call them tasteful, because whenever I see that name, I just think it's a freaking another Italian noodle. Like I got my tortellini and I got my Gazpacho.
Yeah, I don't know.
Number 5.
Gazpacho is just amazing, even when they're not like at their best. It's still. And then number 5, I'm not going to try to say the title of the album, because I can't even pronounce the guy's name. Ihsahn, I think Ihsahn.
Ihsahn has a new album out.
Ihsahn. The new album is AMR.
Oh my god, I'm buying that tomorrow.
Yeah, the follow-up to 2016's
Arctis.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's another one. I'd heard of him. I never heard him, but I got this one in my mailbox or email inbox, and dug into it, and I just love like the mix of heavy and light and the instrumentation, and it's not as like experimental and like I don't know, out there as the previous one. It's sort of more like streamlined a little bit, but it's got some of his like catchy, some of his most. It just really it really impressed me.
All right. Well, now we should definitely head over to Gonzo next, because he's got 3 of 5 overlapping with Jordan.
Yeah, and which kind of makes me laugh, because the 2 previous guys were complaining. Nick and Joey, I think, were complaining about how this year has sucked for new music.
I did not use the word sucked.
Disappointing for new music, gentlemen. I am quoting you guys almost verbatim.
You accurately quoted me.
And I have been overwhelmed with wonderful new music, like so much of it. Like from the very beginning, Orphan Lands, Unsung Prophets, Dead Messiahs. Wow, what an incredible album that is. Oceans of Slumber, a group from Texas, from my home state of Texas. Their album, The Banished Heart. I don't know what's up with it. It's like part doom, it's part progressive, it's part black metal, and it's all amazing. The title track, The Banished Heart, might be my song of the year. It is.
If I remember correctly, you have a review of that done, correct?
I have a review of that up on sonicperspectives.com. Please do check it out.
Was that sonicperspectives.com you said?
I want to say it was sonicperspectives.com.
All right.
Yeah. Amorphous, Queen of Time. Dude, I mean, I've been an Amorphous fan for like 20 years. I haven't seen them live since like 2000 or something, but my God, this, like, I don't understand how a band stays this solid for such a long time. Towards the end of their run with their previous singer Pasi Koskinen, like they were kind of on a downhill thing there. They were like decreasing in quality. Like the last 2 albums with Bassi were not very good. Am Universum and Far From the Sun.
Am Universum is the best album they've ever done.
Disagree, but in either case, like those were like, for me anyway, were like serious dips after the incredible records that were Thousand Lakes and Elegy and Tuonela. Oh my God, what incredible albums! And then Posse goes and they come back with Tommy, and they've been on a roll ever since. And that roll's been going since what, like 2005 or 2006 or something. And these guys are like pushing 50 now, and they are kicking ass. Oh my God, they are so good.
Okay, real quick, say Tunella again.
Tunella.
See, here's the greatest thing. You're Spanish, but you make any foreign language sound sexier.
That's because I'm a sexy beast, man. What do you want? I minored in linguistics. And by the way, last week's episode, I did mispronounce the name of that Corpiclani album. The stress in Finnish is always on the first syllable.
Oh, you mean the one that you corrected me on?
Yeah. I had just had a virtual beer. Like, I was like, I don't know, high on life or something. I don't know. Yeah, I corrected you and I was wrong.
That's funny. Continue.
Okay, so Oceans of Slumber, Orphanland, Amorphous, Between the Buried and Me, Automata 2. Wow! Like I mentioned in last week's episode, how everything that I've been wanting them to do, they're doing now, and I'm so grateful because it is such wow. Like, when you want something to happen for such a long time but don't express it to the people involved, and then they go do it anyway, yeah, that makes me happy.
It's like relatively emotional for them.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned earlier, they are toying with all these different styles. I mean, like even the very first song, Proverbial Gallows, I mean, they were toying with bluegrass, for Christ's sake. Yeah. And then they toy with swing, and they toy with jazz, and they toy with like just straight progressive rock, and they're so good at it, and they're finally letting their musicianship and their songwriting shine. And like I said last week, it just doesn't sound like a long exercise. It sounds like music now, and I love it. It's such a good album.
At this point, I'm pretty sure Joey is getting it between the boner and me.
Hopefully, you're not disappointed when you finally hear
the previous albums.
All right, we got one more for us, and it is another one that I believe you did a review for on sonicperspectives.com.
Yeah, no, actually, no. I reviewed this one for sonicperspectives.com.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my mistake.
Okay. And
Never heard of that site.
and it is by a band that very much like Between the Buried and Me also took a while for me to be completely won over by them. Except this goes back almost 20 years. It's Cataclysm. I gave them several chances when I was like 20, 21 years old, and they just never clicked. And then I didn't give them any time since then, up until just a few weeks ago when Meditations was about to come out, and I love it. This is the kind of melodic death metal that I love. It's snarky, it's ridiculous, it's intense, it's heavy as hell. It's got that humor about it that I love. And it's definitely, like, up to this point, it's definitely my favorite death metal record of the year.
So now we're going to come to mine, and I feel like the last few weeks, because Gonzo and Rodrigo have been in a lot of these chats, it's been very metal heavy, and I may have slightly adjusted my list towards more classic prog, for the sake of needing a little bit of a cleanse here and to separate a little bit. But I'll start with my number 5, and I actually did rank them because I'm OCD and they have to have a numbered order. But it is Third Degree with Ones and Zeros, Volume 0. The really cool thing about this album is the concept between this and the last disc I really enjoy. It's a very cool story. It's a very different sound. It's not like your classic prog sound. It is clearly prog, but a more homey sound. I don't really know how to describe it past that. But it's number 1 at Prog Archives right now, just as an FYI. So I think definitely worth your time to check out if you haven't. It's a great band from New Jersey that I think is deserving of your time. And I'm sure, Jordan, have you heard it?
I haven't heard it, but I've seen them live. I've met them last summer. They played a local gig, so I know them, but I don't think I've heard that one yet.
Okay. My number 4, this is the one where I was going to give this spot to either Amorphous or the band I did give it to, which is Orphanland, with Unsung Prophets and Dead Messiahs. So I definitely agree with Gonzo on that pick. I have heard Orphanland in the past. I've been lukewarm on them, but this album I really, really did enjoy. It is a great step up for them, in my opinion. Number 3 for me is one of the great, I would say unsung, but he's becoming more sung, if that's a thing, as time goes on here. Musicians of our generation, because he plays everything, he sings phenomenally. Mr. Mike Mills and his band Towhider put out an album called Good this year from Down Under, and it is not just good, it is pretty damn great. A couple of tracks on it especially are fantastic, and I really enjoyed that. Number 2, I have these two guys. When they work together in Headspace or otherwise, are just freaking magic together. But Damian Wilson and Adam Wakeman did an album together called The Sun Will Dance in Its Twilight Hour. I have that in at my number 2 spot. And a album that is released this Friday, The Sea Within's debut album, is my number 1. And we've talked about that at length, so I won't waste more time on that. But let's move on then to our favorite live release so far this year. And I'll start this one off, and it is one that me and I think it was Jordan. Yes, Jordan agreed on. Was our favorite release so far was Arion Universe. And nothing, I think, brings together the amazing video, perfect audio, amazing set, the epicness of all those people finally coming together. Just everything about this set is epic, over the top, and amazing. And I would be shocked if anything even came close to knocking it off for me yet this year. Jordan, what do you think?
No, I totally agree. And it's Mike Mills who opens it, right, and is kind of like the narrator.
Correct.
Because he's on the last one, the source.
Correct, and he plays TH1, the machine.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, the video, it's theatrical. It's it's spectacle, but he's got most of the original vocalists and most of the original players, and it's just 2.5 hours of some of the best progressive metal that's ever been made. I would probably say that Arjen is, if not the best, nobody is a better songwriter.
I have to have a Gonzo moment here. It's Arian.
Arian? I thought it was Arjen. Whatever. Mr. Lucas.
It's Arian.
No, I'm saying that I'm not pronouncing the band. I'm saying his name.
Yes, his name is Arian.
His name is Arian. Oh, okay.
Arian is the band. Arian is him.
I'm stupid then. Anyway, he's never corrected me. I guess he doesn't care.
He was actually, well, real quick, on that note, I interviewed him the first time and said that, and his response was, "Oh, that's so nice. The American interviewers never pronounce my name correctly."
Why would she correct it? Oh, well. Anyway.
Continue.
No, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. Every time I talk to him, I tell him I think he's, again, if not the best. I don't think anybody's a better songwriter than him in progressive metal. And his last few albums, starting with The Human Equation, I think are arguably the best progressive metal albums ever made. And it's just it's a flawless collection.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, I don't have his list, so Joey, you might have the same answer, or is it something different?
Something different. I haven't actually heard Arion Universe yet, and I really need to get on that.
Oh my god, what is wrong with you? You were at my house. I could have put it on. I feel like I failed as a friend now.
Well, you showed me so many other wonderful things.
That sounds a bit dirty, but continue.
Wasn't it, though? Anyway, my choice is definitely the new Devin that I've heard so far. It was so good. I haven't even seen the video yet. I've just heard the audio, and it's my favorite by far.
All right. Well, one man that has seen the video, I believe, has his best live album, Gonzo.
I honestly don't know if I am torn, but I am torn. I am torn between it, because it is so grand and over the top and incredible, and the Fates Warning live over Europe, because that is just 5 guys on stage, no theatrics, no bells and whistles. It's just 5 dudes playing their hearts out. So. And they're both so excellent, both the Fates Warning and the Ocean Machine thing, but for completely different reasons. I'm honestly torn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can definitely see it. And it's so hard to compare something that has video to something that's audio only, because you get such a different dimension with the video. But I mean, I have so few. I mean, I'm trying to think if I have anything other than Fates Warning that's audio only. But if I did, I don't see it, just like I don't see anything topping Arion Universe as a live video, I don't see anything topping Fates Warning as a standalone audio set. So that brings us to our best concert of the year so far. So not a release, but the best concert we have actually seen. Gonzo, why don't we start with you?
Best concert of the year? I've only been to a few. The most recent one was Orphaned Land with Tyr. And I really enjoyed Tyr. I love Orphaned Land. They're one of my favorites of all time. But I'd seen them like 5 or 6 times already, including with their classic lineup. The band that really stood out for me that night was a band that I had only heard of before. And that band was Aeternum. Aeternum are a Canadian death metal band, French Canadian, and they have a very they also have a strong Middle Eastern vibe to them. And but if you can imagine Nile, but playing more melodically and a little more clean, and that's not a dig at Nile, that's just their style. Their style is very, very like. Yeah, like if you take the Nile sound and polish it, it would sound very much like Aeternum, and they blew me away. I was so pleasantly surprised. They were fantastic. Other best concert of the year was by our guest from just a few minutes ago. It was Act of Defiance. I mean, they only have 2 albums under their belts, but they are making some delicious thrash for us. And I have some pretty high hopes for them. I hope that band continues to grow, because there's a lot of talent in that band, and I look forward to what they do in the future.
All right. Our next contributor here is going to mention a show that I know quite a few people that went to, and it is the perfect example that if you could flip the bill, I would be there as well. But Jordan, why don't you tell us your best show of the year so far?
Oh, yeah, mine's hands down. Was the Electric Factory in Philly at the end of March. It was Leprous, The Deer Hunter, and Between the Buried and Me, with Between the Buried and Me headlining and finishing. Leprous, was great as an opener, and they captured their sound perfectly. They, the strings and the singer's just like unique voice and everything was a great set to open with. And then I could speak it ad nauseum till my voice goes out about how The Deer Hunter is, again, like my pick for the single most underappreciated band around now, in terms of just like, why has nobody heard of them? And they're freaking brilliant and exceptional. And I could go all night about that. So they did a great set, a little bit of a heavier set, because you'd think that the Deer Hunter, in between Leprous and Between the Buried and Me, are a bit incongruous, because they go heavy, but they don't go near. They're not metal at all.
I just want to say I'm really disappointed in myself that I didn't pull out a clip of Leprous going, ah, like that I could just play constantly during this entire bit of you talking about this show.
Do it in post, dude. Do it in post.
Yeah, you can manipulate it. So they did a good show, and I was relieved that the crowd seemed to like them, because that's one of the few times where if the crowd didn't like a band, I would personally get offended and angry. But no, the Deer Hunter killed it. And then Between the Buried and Me came out and did most of Automata 1, and they closed with Silent Flight, Parliament, and it was just a great, it was just 3 great bands, and it was just a really good vibe the whole night.
Mm-hmm. Well, it could not really be a best of summary here without mentioning this next name. My best shows so far were back-to-back nights in New York City of Mr. Steven Wilson. The man's shows are just incredible. Getting to see him on back-to-back nights meant varied set lists with really cool songs and a lot of very cool stuff being pulled out on the second night, and a lot of the normal audio-visual stuff being left in for the first night. There's a reason he's such a big name. I will always defend him despite his often pompness and some of his other things that can kind of get him in trouble from time to time. But the man puts on such a fantastic show, and I really, really enjoyed those back-to-back nights. Did I get everyone for best concert?
Haven't done me.
Can you say that one more time?
You haven't done me.
That's gonna be like,
you have not done me, Nick.
Suck it!
That's the new opening soundbite of the show.
All right, sorry. I had that sound effect at the ready, so I figured I had to try to use it. Go ahead. Your best concert, Joey?
Okay, I have kind of a 3-way tie. First, first Special Providence at Rozfest were unbelievable, and I knew they would be because I toured with them before with Kyros, and they were unbelievable every night of that tour. But they were just even more unbelievable at Rozfest.
And real quick, I have to say this: I left Rozfest out because I find it's so hard to compare. You know, do I take a single performance? Do I take the whole festival? Because then that's unfair. Florida Lodo would be my other one at Rozfest. They were so incredible. I did not know them going in, and I was so floored by them. But I'm sorry, continue.
That's all right. And then, yeah, the Deer Hunter on that same tour that Jordan mentioned is, oh my God. Deer Hunter are probably my favorite band, just full stop. So that was magical for me, especially because they were playing mostly stuff from Act 4 and 5. And
Joey, how many shows are we going to hit if Haken and the Deer Hunter tour together?
All of the above.
For the record, Joey and I did 5 shows when Haken and Thank You Scientist toured together. So
and it was very fun. Let's do it again as soon as possible.
We are not joking when we say these things.
No.
Hunter's a big fan of the Deer Hunter.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I think he's actually the reason I found them in the first place because he posted about them.
Yeah, he and I did a podcast where we were talking about favorite from each of the acts, and so
yeah.
I think people in the genre, people in the know about them and appreciate them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How could you not?
And funnily enough, the guys from Haken have a lot of varied interests coming into the band, but they've come together on a few acts, and the Deer Hunter is one act that the band as a whole has seemed to really embrace, and Devin Townsend is another that I know a lot of them like that we were talking about earlier. So that's just kind of an interesting aside there. But your third show, Joey?
My third show, which is slightly off genre, but Snarky Puppy are one of the absolute best live bands possible. Like, their live shows are, just from a purely watching people play music on a stage perspective, they're untouched, in my opinion. They're so good every time. So yeah,
Fair
that.
enough. Well, we already went over my most surprising bit of music from the year already with Between the Buried and Me's Automata 2. So Joey, why don't you continue and give us your big surprise for the year so far?
Does it have to be an album?
It does not. It can be an emotion. It can be a color. It can be a feeling. What do you got for
I
us?
was surprised by my left toe recently. No, I would say the biggest surprise musically I was actually, again, at Rozfest, was watching PFM's set. Because I knew nothing about PFM, and it was the last show of Rozfest. I was watching the first about 20 minutes of it, and I was just like, okay, I know what this is going to be. It's going to be, this anthemic kind of slow-paced prog kind of throwback, or, because they're a very old band, kind of old-style prog. Nothing too interesting to see here. Let's just see what they got and wait this out. Then suddenly something happened about 20 minutes in where it became the most energetic show of all time, and it just got crazy for the rest of it, and I my jaw was on the floor. It was so good.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So, yeah.
They, along with Florida Loader, they were my other big, I didn't know going in, but big surprise of the festival. So I'm definitely on board with you there. Jordan, what do you got?
Well, if we're sticking with progressive genres, but I feel like I would say Automata 2 again, but I feel like we're beating a dead horse if I keep talking about that. And because Joey mentioned the Decembers before, I'm breaking the rules and going to what I would say overall is my biggest surprise of the year, which is the new Perfect Circle. Yeah. Is the new Perfect Circle Eat the Elephant. I never really listened to Perfect Circle much. I know some big things. I've heard their stuff. But I definitely did not expect them to sound like they do on this album. And I know it's super divisive. I've gotten angry internet comments for my review. I know other people have. I mean, that's the internet. That's a whole other thing. But just like this melodies, it's like softer than people expect, but it's more symphonic and lots of strings, and it just blew me away. I was not prepared for what it was in a good way.
I got a quick say. It just happened earlier today, which is the only reason this is at my tongue. But I saw an article about a Perfect Circle and their no cell phone policy at shows, and that led me to a video of them performing on, I think, Jimmy Kimmel. And it was my first time. I know they're a big band, but I finally was like, okay, I'll watch this. And I'm like, I truly don't get what the hype around the Perfect Circle, especially live. Like, I didn't see that much that seemed to attribute to the great following they have. But yeah, I'm not well versed on them, but did not overly impress me on that listen. But let's move on then to Gonzo, what's your big surprise so far?
Oh, I've got 3 big surprises, if I may. The first one, we're going to be beating a dead horse. It's Automata 2. We've already talked about it. I'll move on to the next one. Next big surprise, Dimmu Borgir not sucking. That surprised me because their previous bass players, Simon Vortex or ICS Vortex or whatever the hell he wants to call himself now, was a huge part of their identity because of his presence on stage. He's also about 20 feet tall. That helps. But he's got this incredible voice. He handled all the clean singing for several albums right up until In Sorte Diaboli. And then when he was dismissed, the album that came out after that, Abracadabra, whatever the hell it was called, didn't do anything for me. I was just like, whatever, skipped it. And then Ionian came out earlier this year, and they're still trying to find their identity without Simon. At least that's how it sounds to me. And they've replaced him with choirs, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it sounds silly, but I think it's a noble effort. I think that... And I mentioned this because I reviewed this in some website called sonicperspectives.com. Maybe you guys have heard of it. But I mentioned in that review that it sounds like they're trying to redefine themselves. They're trying to find their identity without Simon. And this could be like a step in between here and there right now. But I think that there's still hope for Dimmu Borgir, and there's actually some really, really solid material on that album, and I enjoy it.
I will take your word for it.
and I'm sure this will make Joel very happy. I like the new Ghost. I enjoy it. It's fun, damn it.
I'm glad you put that in there because, yes, I don't think it's as good as the last album, but I do think it's an enjoyable, nice enough album as I do most of their material, and I know Joel despises that album to the depths of hell.
It's a sin. It's a sin. It's a sin. Makes me shake the booty I don't got.
Go find one.
It's like what if ABBA were Satanists? It's a sin, and it's so enjoyable.
Yes. Now, still, shame on them for not sending us the promo. But otherwise, I enjoy. I would honestly. I missed them on this last tour, but I very well may see the next Philly show when they come around to the Tower Theater. I want to give them a chance. Headlining. I saw them open for Maiden. I was further away. I'd like to see what they do for me. In a headlining show. I definitely hope to attend that. So yes, I'm glad you included that. So there you have it, our best of the year so far. I am sure when we get to the end of 2018, we'll honestly probably have a Talking Perspectives at that point that I think is just dedicated to the best of for the year. But we'll talk a little bit in the next week or two about what we're looking forward for the latter half of the year, along with many other exciting topics as always. With me again this evening was Gonzo.
Merp.
Was Mr. Jordan Blum.
Always a pleasure.
Was Mr. Joey Frevola.
Yeah.
And from Lilitu, Henry Derek Bonner joined us earlier. So thank you as always, gentlemen. Please do not forget to subscribe to the podcast so you get all our audio content, not just Talking Perspectives, but a lot of interviews as well. I have interviews coming up with both Marco Miniman and Ray Hearn, along with other interviews guys are doing. Devin Townsend will probably be out by then, but lots of great stuff coming down the pipeline. And don't forget to like us on Facebook, on the Twitter, on the YouTubes. I don't know if we have an Instagram account, but find Joel's photography page and like that for shits and giggles.
Mine too.
Yes, please follow us on Instagrams. We're Instagram starlets, and we need your approval. So again, my name's Nick. I'm here with you on Talking Perspectives, rather. So thank you for listening, and talk to you all next week. Good night.